Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pam Nelson. I am one of the assistant or developers, assistant developers, whatever my title might be now. I've been so many things, I lose track. But welcome to Assessment Day. This particular topic is going to be on formative assessment strategies. We're going to see how to make your formative assessment stronger and move forward. But of course, in order to do that, we need to figure out what formative assessment is. So we're going to start out with a little introduction there.
And I'm going to jump in really quick because I added a slide, which
you?
is my kind of standard slide. So if anybody's joining us new, or even if they're watching this recording, this is how Fall Assessment Day works, how you can have a stronger assessment day. You are going to do your workout. You're going to attend one or more Fall Assessment Day events, and the attending could be watching a recording like this recording. You are then going to lay on your yoga mat and meditate and reflect on what you experienced and complete the assessment day participation form. That gives us some information and allows us to make some of our own improvements in assessment day, as well as documenting your participation and sending you a certificate of participation. And then if you want to really level it up and have an even stronger assessment day, you can refresh and go to our Padlet to earn either a sticker or a magnet. There we go, a magnet. And then you can identify which one of these two wonderful prizes you want to get for sharing how you've done a stronger assessment. And at the end, I'll pop back in with some links for how to follow up on all of these things. Of course, they can be found on Gaucho. And then on that note, I'm going to pass it back to Pam, who is going to talk more about formative assessment.
So I'll let you read this, but the idea is that formative assessment is something that you're doing in the process of your education and working through with your students. It gives you a little bit more of a direct insight to how things are going at that particular moment. And it has a greater, or at least a more prompt ability to be applied to the direct process with those particular students. So this is different from our summative assessment that often happens after the students have learned the material or at the end of a unit. Perhaps a final exam or even some exams and quizzes can be considered summative. These formative assessments are usually a little bit lower stakes, and as it says there, they occur before or during the learning process. For example, next week I'm going to be covering climate change in one of my classes, and I'm going to be doing a before formative assessment to ask them what they know before we start, and then something after that, see what they've learned that's different after the process. And that way I can kind of schedule and design what I'm doing for the very next lecture even more effectively. So that would definitely be formative and doesn't involve a whole bunch of statistical analysis. So if we keep going, that is, like I was saying, it's more simple. It's usually a little bit more quick. It allows the students to get a chance to perform under low stress and low stakes. Usually, we all have the knowledge that students won't necessarily do something unless they're offered points, but at least it's a small number of points to get that. And again, it allows you to turn around and implement those changes relatively quickly so that you can work within the same group of students rather than maybe applying it to another group of students in the future. Okay, go for it. So what the assessment community likes to refer to this as right on time, which means that you are assessing something as it's happening, and that allows you to have a greater perspective and connection with the students, and in co-curricular, you're using that in clubs and not necessarily in an directly academic setting. So it may not be directly on content, but more on experience. And that also allows you to see the effects of that experience on those particular groups and apply that to future cohorts. So this usually, or not always, but usually introduces some kind of an active learning component. You're having a direct interaction. Some of it's writing, some of it is speaking. Last week in my class, something they really enjoy, I finally had some time to put it back in my in-person class, is we have something that looks like a Family Feud, and they have little buzzers that you can get from the active learning kit that is at the CTLE, and then they get to compete for points towards eventually having the highest group get some extra credit points. And it gets very active and very loud and very competitive. But it also made it very clear to both them and me that they had not yet studied for the test they took today. And some people definitely did better on the test today than they did on the questions they answered in the game. So again, that was something that was right on time to hopefully help them to be able to do better on the test. Okay, let's keep going. So this gets everybody up and moving for our activity here and getting everybody stronger. We've got more learning, more interaction, and utilizing all of our tools. There are a number of classroom assessment techniques that can be used. A number of them are well known to multiple people. There's books that we're going to reference later. But what we did is we reached out to some of our department assessment coordinators and we asked them how they got more interaction and more learning in their classes. And so we pulled some feedback from each one of those. So I want to go through there. So when you are looking at these slides later that we will make available, the notes have the very specific and detailed descriptions of exactly what each of these people has done. But one of these groups, this is biology, they have a clickers set, and he was describing how he has the students answer individually and then hides the answers and then asks them to speak with somebody around them and see if they have the same answer. And if their answer is changed, they have a little debate between them, and then they get to answer together as those groups. And then he shows them the difference between the results. So it shows both him and the students if the communication between the students allowed them to work out some of the differences in what they were discussing and understanding from the lesson. So that's one option. Got another one. This is from Brandon in Arts and Humanities. He is using a summary of closing arguments in his topics. And as I said, these will be more concrete and clear in your notes. But one point that he uses as a foundation is making sure that he is asking the same type of closing arguments repetitively and iteratively so that he can pump up the students' critical thinking and seeing their changes in how they can process and manipulate the material when they know how to expect what's going to be the next question for each of the units. And so it does two things of allowing him to see with those closing arguments how they have accessed and understood the material, but also gives them ability to build up their ability to think critically and express it in writing. Okay. A number of the department assessment coordinators, or who we lovingly call DACs, described case studies. I put 3 of the people here, but this was also a couple of discussions I had offline. These are the ones that you will have summaries for in the notes. But a number of these talked about case studies being something where they could give a particular example of a particular person or process and allow the students to evaluate that and be able to apply what they're learning to a specific situation. And that's something that's very necessary in, again, developing critical thinking and extending concepts and being able to put all the pieces together and win the fight to be able to understand the material more clearly. And then we have one more. This is from Karen. She referred to having successes and challenges. This is something I use as well in a slightly different way. This is asking the students in a given week, what kind of successes in understanding or development did you have when you were accessing this week's materials, and or what challenges did you have when you were going through the material and trying to understand it. This is very much a responsive kind of assessment, so that, again, this information is taken from the students, and then you can answer those questions directly at the beginning of the next class or online in a short video for whatever you're doing. This is sometimes also known as a a plus minus or a minute paper, depending on how you use it, where the students can, at the very end of the lesson before they leave your class or at the end of your online video, they give a little bit of a summary. You have to use this creatively. I'm going to give Julie a shout out here for something very similar that she can describe, where it is repetitive. Often if you say, what information did you get out of the material, or what challenges did you have, then they'll summarize one sentence of something you said and not necessarily get to that challenges, because it takes a little bit more thinking to figure out what challenges you had. So you have to structure it pretty carefully instead of just a what'd you get out of it kind of thing, because students will take the easy way out. We're all stressed out, we get it. I would do the same thing. So that's another option, and exploring those concepts. Okay. So what we'd like to do here, and I know we have limited attendance right here, but one of the things that is used for formative assessment is called think, pair, share. And it's utilizing the ability of a student to speak to the person closest to them. It allows them to work with someone, but without the stress of trying to reorganize chairs and get all that stuff done. So when you're working in a larger group, if they are more comfortable working together, then it's technically think group, because it's not just a pair, right? So we were going to call out for you guys to tell us what kind of formative assessments you have used, or what kind of concepts you might have that you'd like to give us here online today. Since I shouted out Julie, I'm going to poke her first, because I like some of the stuff she does in her online class.
Oh, sure. I actually was going to talk about something I do in my in-person research methods class, where there's a lot of formative assessment. So years ago, a little over a decade ago, I flipped that class. So I recorded all of my lectures and put them on YouTube. And let me tell you, it's really interesting to see what lectures on YouTube looked like when they were made in 2012. Anyway, but content's still good, even if slide design and other things haven't kept up with the times. And so when I was learning about this, I was actually part of a group from the CTLE where we were learning about flipping classrooms. And there was this question about, how do you hold students accountable to the content? Because they need to be prepared to come in having listened and be familiar with the content. So I have a couple different mechanisms that I use that kind of work together to do this. So the first thing is, I had created, and this was prior to flipping, I had created guided notes for students to use. And I put the guided notes into a manual. So one of the things they need to do is they have to walk into class at the start of that day, having filled out all of the notes based on the videos. And at times I've required like detailed notes, extra information. Sometimes I look just at the basic blanks. But even then, they could not listen to any of the videos. They could just, fill in the blanks one by one. And so the next recommendation I had been given, which I thought was great, was to make them immediately walk in and do a formative assessment quiz, where kind of prior to me doing a lot of additional information, give them a quiz. So the way that I do it, because I happen to be in a classroom that has computers, is I will rearrange them. So I mix them up and they can collaborate with the people in their row. So each of them will be submitting their own quiz, but they can talk through the information with the group members. So that way they still have that sort of sense of ownership. They don't have to feel like we have to come to an agreement, but they can discuss it. And then what I do is I let them discuss it, and then I walk around and I talk to them. So they were actually laughing at me yesterday because they're like, we have a bunch of questions and we feel like we're just asking you for all the answers. And I said, well, this is a formative assessment process. Like, I need to understand where it is you are, stumbling and what the information is. And, I never walk over, of course, and just give them the answer. I say, well, have you narrowed it down? Which ones did you exclude and why? Which ones do you think it is and why? And then we talk, so I always make them work hard to ultimately get my help in getting, the answer. So that's helpful to me, because then in that moment, I know what's going on. I can then look at the whole class and see, are there particular questions that they missed? So when we come back to class the next time, sometimes I'll pull up the quizzes and we'll talk through the ones that had the lowest response rates. Finally, the other thing that I do, because there's just a lot around this, and this was, this 1 minute paper we heard Pam talking about. Also, what I have them do before they come that first day is they have to identify the most interesting or important thing they felt that they learned and something they struggled with. I don't do a lot with that, honestly, the first day. I tend to come back to it the second day. I look to see, what we discussed in this group quiz, and then I look, what might be the remaining points of confusion, and we review that the second day before then they take a summative quiz the second day. So it's just, it's a lot of different things, and I can do it all, of course, because the class is flipped. So we have the time in class for all of this, but I have really enjoyed kind of finding ways to get them interacting with me, interacting with one another, talking through things. And this class, I've had to give them so much more time for these quizzes than I ever had before. But I love it because they are so engaged in wanting to figure out the answers. I'm like, this feels like a great use of time. So that's my big kind of formative, stronger assessment story.
You want me to go? I'll go.
Yeah.
Okay, so in my day class, in my in-person class, I have a lecture, and then the next day or the day after, I have them get into rotations, and I apply all of the learning based on the lecture from the previous day. And now at that point, the students are broken up into their groups or, with a partner. And I actually have little formative assessments throughout the whole entire class period based on the lecture. For example, scenarios, when we were talking about prenatal health and development in my class, since I teach child development, I have them read the scenario. They discuss it with their partners, or they discuss it with their group. They have to write about it. They have to collaborate. They have to talk about it. They brainstorm, all of that higher level Bloom's taxonomy thinking. And then after they're done there, I check their work. We ask questions, and then they go on to the next one. So then it would be maybe something on birth defects. So they would read the different types of birth defects. They would identify the birth defects, and then they would read a scenario, and then they would do something like that. Or in the different stages of prenatal or pregnancy, of the developmental stages for fetal development. So they love that. I mean, it's a lot of work because, my class doesn't start till 11, and I would get there at 7 to set everything up. But I've noticed the attendance has gotten a lot higher. So my students are looking forward to that next day where they're actually able to, apply the learning. And it's a great way to assess. It's a great way for me to see, okay, were they paying attention with the lecture? Were they able to understand what was going on? And then then we assess at the end of the hour. So that's kind of how I do it. I love the rotations. I do it every single week. So it's been great.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Do you have a classroom that's structured so that you can move around more easily?
Yeah, very
Good,
much.
good.
Absolutely. There's 6 different tables. So then at each different table, I have the rotation. And then perhaps I have, I use the technology. So they have to get their QR code. They go in, they watch the video, and then they answer the questions based on what we previously learned the day before. So yeah,
Very cool.
It is definitely more of a hands-on learning environment. And yeah, very active participation. So
yeah, I know Pam made a comment about the active learning kits that CTLE has. So those of you who like, active learning activities, if you haven't checked out the active learning kits, they're really awesome. Although I put students into just, one group each time, I have, and I'm sure Judy's familiar with this, the little classroom pencils that you would use in a K-12 classroom that come in different colors and shapes and numbers, and I just mix them up, and that's how I put, and I just randomly hand them out, and that's how I put students into groups. So yeah, there's lots of ways to do all of this, and lots of tools also to check with the CTLE about.
Absolutely. And then, to check for prior knowledge. So before I even lecture, I will do a a Kahoot. Is that what I'm thinking of? Yeah. Or yeah. And then have them and see what they know, So at that point, I'm like, see, we didn't necessarily know these terms. And then I can look at their assessment that way. So what do I need to teach? What do they already know? And, and then that way it's great for me to just maybe, stop and readjust my, my lecture or, my planning to see, what do the students know? And, or what do they still want to learn? So.
And Judy, in case people have questions, are you willing to introduce yourself and kind of say where you are?
Of course. Yeah. I love to talk. Are you kidding me? It's my hobby. I love it. And with my online classes, I give them one-on-one videos based on their weekly assignments. And then at the very end or throughout the video, I give them a question. And if they do watch, and then they do reply back, then I give them, I throw them an extra point because they actually took the time to listen to my, the video that I created specifically for that individual student.
But what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they're like, hey, I want to know more?
Oh yeah, just in my email, judy.basham@gccaz.edu. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you. Sorry, I just go on and on and on. I mean,
We always
I love it.
I have that passion. It gets me so excited, So right now my day class ended. So I'm just doing fully online right now. And it's just killing me because it's like I need to get back with the students. So that's the reason why, Julie, I'm in the high school setting, substitute teaching, because I just need to be with students. It's that interaction that fills my bucket.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I was speaking of like talking and time going so fast. We are almost out of time.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
I know. No. Was there something? I mean, we can certainly go a little longer. I know, Michelle, you put something into the chat. Was there something you wanted to share?
I was just going to say, so as a librarian, we don't always teach full semester for credit classes, but we're called in to do more of like a guest lecture, information literacy session. And so we don't always know what they know in terms of, especially with research. So we like to do an exercise like with a know, want to know, learn. So starting out with, what do you already know about the library or using research resources? And then what do you want to get out of this session? And then at the end of the session, sort of a learned. So usually just like a note card, something, really low stakes. And then we can collect those at the end sort of to see, where they came in and where we left off with them. So yeah, easy, low stakes.
Pam, you want to share some additional
Totally
resources?
down because that's exactly what I want to do with the climate change thing, but I didn't have a good way to put it. So now I have words. Thank you.
The best thing about getting into assessment conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic.
And on that note, if you want to show our resources, yeah. So here's a couple of places that you can get some ideas for what they call lecture breaks or CATS, classroom assessment techniques. I am old school, so I read the CATS book a million years ago and started using it 999,000 years ago. So I have found that very helpful. Julie introduced me to the new one. I will fully disclose that I have not completed it yet, but it has the same kinds of stuff from what I've looked at on the inside, and it gives you a little bit more guidance on how to do each of the things that you can incorporate into a single lecture, whether it be online or on ground. So if you have interest in that, there's a couple of things to look at there.
And one thing that's nice about the hitting pause button is it has like a little chart. It'll say, you could use this in this type of, an online class or an in-person class, or so it has all sorts of categories. So you can kind of search for, I need this type of activity in this modality of a class, and you can see what types of things might fit that. So yeah, it's a pretty cool one. I do have both. Because they're great, but it's always a great resource to be able to rely upon, not just colleagues, but other resources when we're trying to find ways to, look at student learning in a formative way, which is the primary way we look at it, right? Mm-hmm. Before I do Fall Assessment Day closing remarks, anything else from you, Pam?
No, there's going to be a little bit of this in the Susky course that we're going to introduce in the spring. for doing a book study on some of the assessment national trends and ideas. There is a little tiny section that's going to show up on some of these as a type of assessment as well. So I may be hitting you up there, Judy, for some assistance and putting some examples in there. But I think
No
we're
problem.
excited to introduce all this.
Absolutely, no problem. And Shannon Smith loves to come in because she always is always, what do you have planned today? And then like I kind of tell her, and she's like, God. And so she's come in and seen the rotations, and she's like, it's really great. But it is definitely, you do have to have the room, you know, like you had said, it has to be able to function where students are able to move freely. It
Right.
doesn't work necessarily in all environments, but absolutely, I'd be more than happy to help Pam.
And I will share, I mean, when I was, I think my second year here for back before IDPs, I was doing my FEP as a second year faculty member. And the best piece of advice I ever got was go watch other people teach. And I watched like 8 different faculty teach, and I learned so much. And they maybe did things ways that I wouldn't or weren't right for me, but it was really helpful. And then in recent years, there was a time when I'm like, I just really didn't love how I was covering personality in Psych 101. I thought, who in my department does this really well? I said, I think Trisha Levine does it really well. So I said, hey, can I just come in and sit in your class and watch how you do this? And I did. And she has a very different teaching style than I did. So not everything, I was able to pull back, but there was a lot of conceptual things that I thought I can use these same things and put them into my class. So I do highly recommend, if you get into contact with somebody that is maybe doing something interesting, ask them if you can, check out their Canvas course, or even better, go into their in-person course. I think we all would be happy to have people come into our courses, and it's an awesome way to learn. So it's just one of the things I really encourage any faculty at any point in their career to do. All right. Now, on this note, we are going to be wrapping this section up. So thank you very much for participating in Fall Assessment Day and putting some links into the chat. And they are also, of course, available all on Gaucho. One is the link to Gaucho and our Fall Assessment Day page. When you are done participating with whatever you are participating in for Fall Assessment Day, we ask that you complete the participation form and you get your certificate and credit, and we get some good information too. And then as a final reminder, you can go and complete our Padlet, which is another great formative assessment strategy. You can get Padlet accounts from our CTLE. And if you post to our Padlet, you can earn either a cool holographic sticker or a nice assessment day magnet. But we appreciate everybody coming today, or whether you're watching the recording of this section. And I want to give a big shout out to Pam Nelson for organizing and leading us through all of this great information on formative assessment. And thank you to those who came and participated as well. And we hope you have a great day.
Thanks, guys.